Alright, so this is the first episode of Gloomcast by Rage Badger Gaming. So we're going to just, introduce ourselves, because I'm going to make this as awkward as possible. So everyone probably knows me, Brett, hosting Rage Badger. And if you've seen any of our Let's Plays, we have Cliff.
Hello.
Cliff.
You may have seen me as Mad Scotsman. I'm currently playing Three Spears.
Yeah, he's also played the Angry Face and the Cragheart before that in the same campaign. We also have Sastry, who is Masochism Tango on the Steam.
I think so. Everyone just says Zorg.
Yeah, Xorn. Just basically been playing Xorn nearly the whole time, but he had a Tinkerer before that.
Right, praise Zorg. Yeah, I haven't had many characters.
Yeah, we'll fix that soon. So
maybe soon.
So
step back on clipping.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Well, we'll retire you this next week. That was a fun solo scenario. We're going to talk about a lot of Gloomhaven-related topics more in depth. Some crunchy, some fluffy, and more importantly, we'll try to get into some more diverse topics, like not necessarily Gloomhaven, but like for fans of Gloomhaven and other relevant news in the board gaming thing. So, kind of just slap that all into one little thing and have a little more of a round table type discussion on every topic. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is Gloomhaven? I know we've probably we've talked about it at length, but some people are just really picking it up. We actually saw with the Frosthaven Kickstarter that a bunch of people wanted the big bundle. We're like, give me Frosthaven, give me the original Gloomhaven, and jumped in late. And some people were just introduced to Gloomhaven by, Shroud, who has a crap ton of followers. They're just, hey, what even is this? And so I figured, start off episode 1. What is it?
Gloomhaven, I first heard about from Brett years ago. I think they got it and had opened it up and were a little confused at all these boxes and things that were hiding information from them. So they wanted to get in and figure out what was going on. So at some point, a sale popped up and I grabbed it because I thought it was going to be an interesting to play at some time down the road. So when everybody got stuck in their houses for a long time, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to reach out across the internet and play a fun, sort of interestingly hybrid between card-based and miniature strategy-based game that has some interesting lore. So that's what brought me to it.
I don't know if you actually said what it was. Gloomhaven is a board game. And it's a game about a village or a city, Gloomhaven, and medieval fantasy adventurers who adventure in all sorts of ways within it. And a story slowly unfolds as you hit milestones and things. It's kind of almost like a board game version of like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with preset characters, and maybe a little bit more stringent. Like, you can't go off the beaten path and have a DM just invent things the way you could in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, you're definitely notably more confined to the relevant scenarios and zones.
Right. And, but also there's also not like a DM where it's like, this guy versus the players or anything like that. Like, everybody, 1 to 4 people, all of them are playing characters. And then there are rules for what a DM would do in terms of, like, this is how monsters should think, this is how monsters should move, this is how monsters should attack. And the random element that you would have in, like, a Dungeons & Dragons game where you would pick up a D20 and roll it is done by cards. So you would draw a card, and a card would have for a monster what type of attack they would use. Players will set down cards in a specific order to determine like initiative as well as what attacks they use.
I actually really like the card component of it.
I do. I'll get to that in a second. But then there's like a modifier card, whether there's a +1, +2 miss, so on and so forth. And yeah, I totally agree. The card thing is, I was introduced to Gloomhaven whenever people were saying, hey, we need a 4th. Asshole, are you available to play? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Same kind of situation. It was the the current events of the world gave me a little bit more free time.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
kind of how this whole Let's Play series even got started. Is there anything else to do? No.
right. Do we want to do another Dungeons and Dragons campaign that we'll do for 4 months and then get bored with? But basically, yeah.
Well, yes, we do, but also we want to play Gloomhaven.
Yeah, we want to do both of those.
We can do both. But yeah, the card thing that we're mentioning is that's kind of the thing I really like about the game is its simplicity. I can do complex games. Lots of people can do complex games. Lots of people like complex games, but complex games are hard to pick up, so on and so forth.
You know,
and
it's
I
actually
really kind of.
I'm going to interrupt. You know, it's really funny. If you go to Board Game Geek and see the weight of games where they say, like, how lightweight is this? And you can actually, based off of all the user polls and based off feedback of the huge amount of users that go to Board Game Geek, you can find effectively the weight of games. So you can go to, like, Wingspan, which is relatively lightweight, and see, like, oh, well, that means clearly this is easy able to pick up. And Gloomhaven, which you kind of described as not necessarily, as almost lauding its, the simplicity of just having these cards, and then saying that maybe it's not necessarily, it's certainly not lightweight in the box perspective, being, like, what, over 20 pounds, but it's got a heavy weight on the board game scale.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, okay. But in general, like, it's a very simple mechanic. You have a deck of cards. You lay down 2 cards. The first one that you lay down, in terms of, like, left-right order.
It's your initiative.
The left one is your initiative. There's a number on it that indicates your initiative. And then there's a top and a bottom. So it's a game that, with a very little bit of explanation, you can pick up and begin to strategize and kind of learn very quickly.
Yeah,
and I like that.
The core concepts are basic.
Right, and I appreciate something like that, where it's easy to learn, hard to master, and the different, like, character combinations, and you level up, you get new cards, and what kind of equipment, and that's kind of the mastering part, and I think that's a very fluid transition to learn, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, certainly. I think I actually thought it was pretty interesting because having played board game D&D equivalents, like it almost reminded me of Descent, but one of the problems, like Descent, it does have that game master, that DM, and the weird part is that Descent has kind of this DM versus the players mentality, where they, like, here, you have these small cards, and you can just, whenever you want to, try to ruin their scenarios by adding these, like, traps and stuff. And it makes it almost a competitive game between the two of them. And then you have, like, games like, Mage Knight, which is actually really interesting because it's you have all these cards, and you can play Mage Knight cooperatively, but it doesn't necessarily have, like, the limited deck style. Like, Mage Knight has, like, just very, very, very generic cards, like, this allows you to move, this allows you to attack, and then you can get cool spells later, but almost everything in Gloomhaven starts with, like, cards like Rumbling Advance, you will heal and infuse Earth, or move, damage everything around you, and infuse Earth, all on the first, like, level 1 cards, and then no one else really gets cards like that, so it kind of deviates there, although there's the generic, like, Mage Knight has I don't want to move, but all I have is an attack card. You can generically turn anything into, like, a low move, and Gloomhaven has that any bottom can turn into a move, any top can turn into an attack, albeit weak, but at least it gives you the option of, I don't want to do any of this on the bottom, like, especially preserving a lost card. And Mage Knight doesn't have losses either, so it's interesting how you're like, well, it's like this, and it really is not close to anything else, and it's supposed to be like a dungeon crawler, but it almost feels like a dungeon puzzle. It doesn't really feel like it plays like other dungeon crawlers.
It's a dungeon crawler with a campaign, so it's not just, okay, you go into the dungeon, you kick the demon's butt, you take its gold, and you leave, and then you set up a new dungeon randomly or from a book or whatever, because you always are kind of going back to this overarching story where what's going on in this town. and you have these little divergent paths where it's like, well, you could help this demon or you could help this evil warlock, and that's going to affect your story and what missions are available and what's happening in the town one way versus another. You don't get a whole lot of role playing like you may in a D&D campaign or anything like that. You know, we sort of joke about this and that, and there's certain cards where, with like we see retired characters come back and stuff, but we don't really, you know, write or invent too much of our character stories. And yeah, I guess I did mention some of the other cards there's more mechanics than just what we just talked about, but that's I guess part of the easy to learn, hard to master part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Gloomhaven is a neat board game that apparently is very heavy. It's more than Monopoly, if you were looking for something like that.
Oh,
how much is word. Oh, it's more than oh crap! What was the original one called?
Wait, there's an original one?
Yeah, before Monopoly. Hang on, I'm sorry, Internet. You're gonna
not Diplomacy,
talking.
Is it?
No. It was the Landlord's game.
Really?
Is what it originally was called. Yeah, look that up. It was created by Elizabeth Maggie. I totally knew that off the top of my head. I'm not looking at Wikipedia right now.
Okay. Did she invent capitalism as well?
No. However, whereas capitalism, you could argue, in a game of Monopoly, is kind of encouraged, the purpose of the Landlord's game was to sort of, in Elizabeth Maggie's eyes, let's not, push anybody out or say, hurt certain people's beliefs. But Elizabeth Maggie was not a fan of capitalism, and so she tried to buy a board game for her, elementary school kids, show how some of capitalism's pratfalls, and show how in capitalism nobody could necessarily win. At least that was kind of my interpretation.
That's why nobody ever wins a game of Monopoly.
Oh, one person wins, and they feel really good, and they don't have friends at that table anymore. That's what actually happens in Monopoly. But the game operated in there was a little bit of difference to it. I think you can still get published versions of it. It might be public domain now, because it was like 1904, I think.
Okay.
So
you guys thought you
Divergent, I'm sorry. Gloomhaven.
But instead, you're listening to a Landlord's game podcast.
That's right.
Everybody get hyped for the upcoming Landlord's game content appearing on Rage Badger Gaming.
Dude, you know what though? God. You say that, but I bet you
Marcos's Landlord Game Corner.
Oh no!
Well, I was gonna say if you say like get ready for that content, people are actually going to ask us to play Landlord's Game.
No. I hate Monopoly so much.
It's not Monopoly. It's the Landlord's Game. It's a different game.
Yep, it's a totally different game.
I already hate it. It inspired Monopoly. I hate it.
Just like it turns out Gloomhaven is not Dungeons & Dragons.
Right. Actually, that would be a good subject for us to research, because we didn't. What inspired Gloomhaven?
Isaac in an AMA on Reddit, because I never check Reddit, right? But Isaac said in one of those that he had actually been doing world building for Dungeons & Dragons, and he really liked some of his stuff, but he wanted to make this new kind of game that was like D&D, but not. I guess we'd have to revisit that thread, but one of the things is he wanted to make a world not like adapt it from one of his own D&D worlds. He wanted to make a new world, something that was just for this new game. So that's how he started with Gloomhaven. I think he actually started with this one area, and partially why we don't necessarily know everything about the world is it wasn't necessarily complete at the time, but there's way more written than we have access to.
So there is a Gloomhaven Bible somewhere.
It's
a
hidden.
design
Super
document.
Secret, though. It's
that additional information might segue nicely into the next thing we're going to talk about here.
Oh yeah, and because of that, someone who clearly does have access to some of the Gloomhaven lore is SourcePoint Press, which is now going to be doing a Gloomhaven comic book, which I thought was pretty neat. The Fallen Lion. First off, Sash Street Cliff. Are you guys familiar at all with the Jaws of the Lion?
I've heard some good things about it. I've watched some of your streaming with Stephanie where you're playing the Hatchet and the Void Warden through that, I think. But it's sort of a prequel to Gloomhaven, is it?
Effectively, yeah. Before, Jixera stops by and says, "Hey, Gloomhaven people, you adventurers, I want to pay you guys. Go to the Black Barrow." And before any of the events that start there or afterwards, the Jaws were in Gloomhaven, or they still are in Gloomhaven, supposedly. A mercenary band. It's very similar to, Gloomhaven. You're making your own group of mercenaries, but unlike them, people don't leave. It's just a static group. Except it's not so static, it seems. It's supposed to have these group of 4 people. One of which I thought was funny because the Red Guard is evidently named Tiber, which certainly tickled me. But this seems to be focusing on Anafi, a Vermling mine thief, and this Vermling was kicked out of the jaws of the lion.
You're going to have to briefly explain to people who don't know us or our history, and do it briefly, why the name Tiber tickles you.
Oh,
because they don't know. They're just confused now.
Yeah, Tiber was a character in one of my campaigns, played by Sastry, who turned on the party, but it was something planned from the beginning of the campaign. So seeing like some guy with literally devil horns named Tiber, I'm like, this is the guy who caused all the problems. Initially, I'm like, the Red Guard's their tank, but now I know his name's Tiber.
Curse their sudden but inevitable betrayal. And to point that out, that was it was planned from the beginning, but it was planned between me and DM Rage, Brett, and none of the other players at all knew about this upcoming betrayal. And I think that to this day, Cliff still hasn't forgiven me.
I haven't.
No, he really hasn't. It was a good time for some.
Yep.
So yeah, so despite that, I'm sure we'll like the character Tiber, but they've got this. Sourcepoint Press has this nice kind of a Fallen Lion. It's a one-shot thing made by with Travis McIntyre, Nolan Nasser, and Tyler. What's that? How do you pronounce that last name? Souls? I want to say Souls.
Yeah.
All right. Souls.
Souls-like.
But they're saying like they want to dig into some of this lore that we were talking about, like for literally saying quattral punk bands, drug-dealing Inox street gangs, a dark god sleeping beneath Gloomhaven, and I'm like, first off, hold on, there's quattral punk bands. Like
that implies that there were previously quattral mainstream bands.
Yeah, that's
against
true.
Whom
also,
the punk bands are rebelling.
This is actually the very first I've ever heard of a quattral punk band. I guess I didn't read whatever stuff that you sent to me to prep for this closely enough, because like, holy crap, now I'm interested. I'm down.
Are there quattral metalcore bands?
No, not metalcore. It's like maybe there's metal bands. Maybe there's like Inox Power. Actually, I don't think it's Inox. I don't know who it'd be, but there's certainly someone.
No, it would be Inox Hard Rock Band.
Oh, Inox. Oh, yeah. No, Cragheart.
Who would be like the glam hair metal band race of Gloomhaven?
Savas would definitely be hard rock.
The wispy Esthers?
Esthers? Oh, yeah.
Would be glam.
Oh, man. We're going to have to assign metal subgenres to all the races, aren't we?
Yep.
But,
Harrowers grunge.
Oh, God. Well, we'll have to cover that in another episode. But something I liked about the character, they're talking about Anafi, I think, and...
Xorn Vana.
She's got she's a Vermling. What I thought was just the funniest thing of the sketches. You can actually go to the site, Sourcepoint Press posted, and see that they've got some of the sketches of the characters. And the Mind Thief, the one who supposedly caused this job to go all wrong, has like a little ribbon tied to her tail, which is I'm like. How could you hate that Mind Thief? It's so adorable. It's like a cat rat with a ribbon.
Okay. Is this supposed to be the Mind Thief?
It is.
In Gloomhaven?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, really? So that's supposed to be the player character?
Yeah. So yeah, we get to find out why they're not in the jaws of the lion, and some of the art shows an athlete talking to a harrower. So wonder if there's some deal there that went awry, because you can't trust any of those. They're gonna just infest civilians and just let them die.
But I trust Xorn.
I do. We all trust Xorn. Praise Xorn.
Praise Xorn.
So I'm pretty excited for that. I'm not sure how many people are necessarily into comic books, but I think the comic book board game overlap is probably pretty big.
There might be a nerd or two who have read a comic book and played a board game.
No.
I have done both of those things.
All right, so
I haven't.
I guess I'm pretty excited about it.
It sounds interesting. I mean, I knew very little about it. I would pick one up to be interested, but now that you're talking about Quattro, punk bands and stuff, I'm getting more and more. Do you think they have Rocky mohawks, gem mohawks?
I have no idea, but I don't think Quattros have hair, do they?
I know, but I mean, they just the tops of their heads that are kind of protrusions of different minerals or whatnot. I think they just
maybe they'll
grow
build
it long.
a mohawk.
Yeah,
they can build it.
Yeah,
the Quattros, they're smart. So something that was clearly a problem with the initial deployment of Gloomhaven was stamina potions. Especially when they moved to Gloomhaven Digital and Jaws of the Lion. They already introduced the nerfed stamina potion. He announced it online, please, I have nerfed stamina potions, but it's one of those things where it's not really official unless you actually get... we've been playing with nerfed stamina potions the entire time on Let's Play on our thing. From day one, I'm we're nerfing these. This is the new... Just pretend it says this. And
wait, technically they're not. It's unofficial.
It's official because in Gloomhaven Digital and in Jaws of the Lion, they printed literally. If you get the Jaws of the Lion stamina potions, they have the nerfed versions printed. So it's super official. And going forward into Frosthaven, that's going to carry over as well. So,
I see.
But the nerfed stamina potion, but there's an unofficial change called the Endurance Potion. And the Endurance Potion gives you effectively the same amount of stamina you have with the other stamina potion, which is interesting. But the real reason why stamina potion wasn't necessarily so overpowered was the stamina part, but kind of the pick your best card and get it back thing. So the Endurance Potion doesn't really give you that. The next time you could, whenever you would use a default top or a default bottom, just the standard attack 2 or move 2, or there's, maybe other ways to change those, you can put a token on this card, and once you've done this twice, you remove the card, but instead of discarding that basic action, it instead goes back to your hand. Notice it also says you may recover it, so it doesn't force you to be I'm going to move 2, crap, I burned a charge. So you can creatively use these to, on odd hand sizes, to bump your stamina before resting by 1. Effectively, you could potentially delay exhaustion by 2 turns by using this, whereas the stamina potion, especially the nerfed stamina potion, doesn't give you that. However, stamina potion gives you some of your best actions back twice, and this one says you have to start using default actions just to get that longevity.
I really don't like the endurance potion as compared to the nerfed stamina potion, primarily because it doesn't have a situational use that the stamina potion does. If there's an action that you really know that you'll need to take next turn, say that you're about to get hit in the face and you want to get your low initiative shield card back or something like that, it doesn't always have to be your best action. It just might be something specific that you know you're really going to want next turn. You can get that back with a nerfed stamina potion. An endurance potion seems like it'd be great just for extending your longevity, but apart from that, it doesn't seem like it has that dynamic use like a nerfed stamina potion does.
Also, I do think other classes are going to be able to play with the endurance potion better. For example, especially at low levels, the Drifter, the Mind Thief, or there's other classes, but I'm just going to stick to those two because spoilers. The Drifter with a Crushing Blow or Sustained Momentum can attack for or move for with default actions, and the Mind Thief can attack for with default actions, which absolutely seem better as a being able to not only prevent yourself from burning out, but actually having at least a semi-decent turn instead of just I'm gonna, attack 2, which never attack 2 with no other effect never really feels super happy on a top half.
Yeah.
When you say
That's
that
true.
Wait, so when you say that the default, do you actually mean like the ability or just the move 2, punch 2 thing?
Yeah, just the move 2, punch 2.
Oh, that's awful. Fuck that nonsense.
There's the general idea that, although there's a bit of a learning curve to Gloomhaven, that stamina potions are one of the reasons why, and its equivalents are why Gloomhaven gets a little easier as you get to high prosperity and stuff. And this may be one of the ways to patch breaking it.
But I mean, I can't ever think of any opportunity other than I had a range card prepared, something's in my face now, that you really want to use the default. Is there a class or something like that kind of is built off of using the defaults? Because it's always just a backup option. There's almost no reason to.
The Drifter and Mind Thief have better default actions. Can have better default actions, but not too terribly many others. The only thing I can think of is sometimes people will be like, I like this double loss, like my hatchet. I usually bring a double loss every scenario, and what I do is I treat the bottom half as a move 2 until I want to use the bottom half for its real effect, where I double my next attack. And they usually, I'll turn hey, this turn I'm going to be doing an attack 18. And until then, the bottom half just says move 2. That's rude. So this would kind of allow me to play that hatchet as a, hey, I'm at this odd rest number. I'll move 2 with double throw, get it back, or I could potentially move 2, get it back, set up into the actual double throw, or see, the problem is then I still don't like it that much. I know I think we're all in agreement though. Although it's an interesting way to try to counteract it. It's there's something about the stamina potions are certainly very powerful, but it's that versatility is really nice.
Yeah, I just think the endurance potion is less fun. That's the best way I can play it.
I agree.
There's no really fun way to use it. It's nice to be able to go longer before you exhaust, but it's not necessarily more fun.
It's utilitarian, and it's also not as easy to understand. It's, you can get this card back, but you put a token on this thing, and then you remove it, but you can only do that if you did this default feature versus the cool thing in the card versus use this potion, pick up a card, put it back in your thing, you're done.
Yeah,
it's overly.
Nerfed stamina potion's super easy to understand and more fun. It's everything about it's Sorry, Variant.
Variant, you're trash. Go home.
All right, so something that is interesting actually is people's variants or homebrew stuff. I think, although I wasn't as big a fan of this, is sometimes people have developed homebrew classes. Like what I like is the Amber Aegis, which my friend Wilting Moon designed.
He's your friend now.
Yeah.
Ooh la la!
I'm hanging out with him in Germany next year, so.
La la! Someone's traveling to Germany to visit a friend. How very great for you.
I'm going to Essensfield, but
it must be nice. It must be nice to have friends. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh yeah. I know you don't have any.
No.
We pay you, so.
You don't even do that.
For friendship. No, I pay. I pay you in winks, and evidently loud meows. I got a cat shouting at me. But I actually liked reading some of the bits on how he came to the design of the Amber Aegis, and kind of realized that although I read some of the lore for some of the races in Gloomhaven, I found them to be very interesting. I think the Harrower lore they're one of the more ones that I really got into during the course of the game. So there's probably going to be a little bit of spoilers here. So if you want to go to the next topic, I will include a little shortcut in the description. So, the Amber Aegis, which actually is posted on, I think, on Reddit. It may have been posted on Board Game Geek too, but I know that there's a Reddit thread, and there's the custom class Discord that actually has a lot of very interesting designs. But it's one of those between the Harrower characters that are playable. It is very interesting. So now that we're kind of past the spoiler guard, spoilers ahead. The Plague Herald really got my attention because just the idea of someone who's like a swarm of bugs, but that gained like some hive mind sentience, which first off completely blew my mind. But then when Frosthaven came out and they're like, here's the Geminate, it's 2 swarms, but they effectively they're almost helping. They're symbiotic, but they're kind of at odds because many of its cards end up being like, I'm going to have this really profound effect. Like one of its things it can do is like, so it has like a high attack, ranged attack that can multi-target, and you go, wow, that's a lot. But then it ends up like saying, like, all right, I'm going to force myself to shift forms. What's one of its effects? By the way, when I did that, I kind of muddled us and cursed us. Sorry about it, melee form. And melee form's like, well, screw you. All right, he does some stuff back. Back to you. By the way, you're wounded. I did that. Sorry. So, although they have these cool effects, they end up screwing over the other form in the process.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pretty cool that they created a class which forces a sort of inner dialogue on itself through the statuses it's putting on.
Yeah, I think Marcel has an obsession because Marcel designed that class, the Geminate, and
Jigsaw.
Yeah, Jigsaw. he designed the Secret of Xorn quest chain to unlock the Plague Herald, and he one of the ways to unlock the Plague Herald. He didn't design. I don't think he designed the other one. I think he just did the Secret of Xorn. But also, when he was building the world and stuff, initially the monsters, the Harrowers, which I don't think you guys have seen very much, those monsters were, I believe, added by him for that quest chain, but then it got added to the other scenarios. So that whole deck and their abilities was all of that. So I'm like, man, this guy really likes these bug dudes.
Yeah,
he sure seems to.
Like just the idea, like going through some of the what people do have open access to is like these insects merge their intelligence to create like a hive mind of highly intelligent thought. And in a congregation, the insects can form sounds that try to roughly mirror human speech to converse with other sentient races. However, the interesting part about the Geminate is, and something we actually learned in the original Gloomhaven before that lore, is they don't like to chitter that. That's kind of how they just say, like, I'm talking to a quattro. Let's try to give them sound because they have to like lower themselves to the level of other races, because normal Harrowers are like fusion. Okay, now we had a conversation. That's literally the in lore, like how they like. All right, now let's split apart. Cool, we exchange thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. That's
and for some reason they like Xorn a whole lot.
Well, some of them do.
He's the god of the bugs.
Praise Xorn.
Yeah, the god of plagues. The interesting thing is they have a very interesting perspective because they're kind of a group of things, and a lot of the beings that make up one single hive mind experiences death all the time. They have a very nihilistic view of the world that it makes them almost view they almost get viewed. They do get viewed as being like evil as a result, but it's just kind of when you have this that kind of mentality, it's just very alien for other the single entity races to understand that level of like that perspective.
Right. So yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see what kind of lore gets put into Frosthaven with the Geminate. What I imagine the sort of event cards related to the specific classes will be making a return.
I,
So
I don't think we have a confirmation on that. That would be nice, especially because I think we for me at least, like for the Savas, I actually learned way more from just playing a Cragheart, getting some of the event cards and some of the
yeah,
just reading just the back of his card. Then I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. But okay, read the back of the Geminate. Hopefully, we get a few Geminate events
Yeah.
to expand upon it. And the Seeker of Xorn quest chain, I think, added way more knowledge I had about the Harrowers once it compared to the other unlock, which is interesting, but certainly doesn't feel like it gives you any of that perspective.
Yeah, you should.
right.
You should talk about your experience with that, because the only experience I have of them is the Seeker of Xorn. You have played in a game where a Plague Herald was unlocked without its character exploding, basically.
It's funny because he actually came to the same thing. He's like, okay, he was trying to create the perfect poison, and I'm like, all right, cool. And then he does it, and he leaves the group, and we're like, okay, that
Cool.
happens. Cool. But then he's like, so then Gator's like, actually, he didn't leave the group. What? He drank the poison and became a swarm of bugs. I'm like, oh, I like that. That would be cool. So naturally, when we get to the Let's Play, we could do the Seeker of Xorn final scenario, and it's like, you die, you become a swarm of bugs, and I'm like, oh, man. Anyway, hats off to Marcel for writing that. That's my favorite out of all the retirement quest chains. Also, the scenarios felt notably different. I really like the interesting scenario design on those, even though a couple of them felt they were hard.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's
motherfucker.
some good stuff. I particularly like the one where we were all split apart and had no way to help each other.
Oh, the
So we all had our
God.
four little individual paths, through
Challenges,
a bunch of monsters.
Yeah. I'm like, I know I'm like, my Mind Thief, I didn't feel like, I was like, oh, this is easy, especially because since they can't focus anyone else, anything I had that gave invisibility felt very cheap to use.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and my Tinker was like, kind of built to heal people and stand behind them, and all of a sudden they just got stuff to murder.
Yeah, I thought it was
Marcel,
actually funny,
more like
there at the end,
Marsadist.
you actually got super creative because you're like, well, I've got all these losses, and at the end you're like, I'm going to stun you, I'm going to immobilize these guys, and I've got this big move 6, and usually end up only using it for its good initiative. But you're like, well, I'm going to use it for good initiative. Move 6, get over there. I'm going to loot it. And then it was like, well, all you needed to do was run over there and loot it, and you stun.
Oh, is that the? Yeah.
You crowd controlled enough, but I'm like, okay. So it allows people to. That scenario is pretty cool. Just allowing people to, manipulate. Yeah. Or like Stephanie kind of did the invisibility thing too, and I know the Cragheart was like, hey, here's some obstacles, and that I think you actually did that like rock tunnel to get to the thing. So it's actually like you need to think on how to play by yourself and get to there with the tools that your class gives you.
Yep.
So, yeah, but the Xorn quest chain was just great, and learning more about that, especially because Xorn is featured in the solo scenario for Cthulhu.
I wonder if it'll show up in the comic.
Zorn, maybe, but I know a Harrower will be. It's on the cover, by the way.
No, there was something about a god sleeping beneath the city.
I think I have an idea on who that is because it is about the Jaws. And the Jaws are fighting a sleeping god.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I think it's related to that, but that's just my take. So, but
That makes
I think that's pretty fun. I'm very excited to hear more about the Geminate when Frosthaven hits next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, although we did talk about, the Landlord game, which is not a
Board
dungeon
games.
crawler. Yeah.
Correct.
There actually is a more proto D&D, like proto Gloomhaven game, HeroQuest, that just got rebooted. So something I thought was interesting, though, is they're like, hey, do you guys remember HeroQuest? Yeah, I remember HeroQuest.
I didn't, but
I did. I remember
Yeah.
HeroQuest. And they're like, do you want it? Yeah. And they're like, all right, we've redone all the miniatures, yeah? And it's $100. What else did you do? And from the looks of it, it's just the the same old nostalgic mechanics. And I know it was initially, the target audience is supposed to be like introductory, like, hey, you've got like, teenagers or kids like gathered around a table. You just recite these texts and walk through the dungeon and like roll dice, and then there's very little depth to it. But they're like, hey, we're gonna bring that back, and I guess I'm not sure how I actually feel about just a verbatim reboot.
I'm sure about how I feel. I think it's a bunch of crap. I think that if you're going to take a board game that existed in the 80s, not change it in any way whatsoever, except for having new art, and then charge $100 for it, it's a bunch of crap.
Whoa. The elf's a lady now, so they changed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right. How does that change the game mechanically?
Nothing at all. She's just as powerful as the male elf.
Okay, that's good. Equality is good, but charging $100 for an art update to a game from 30 years ago is not good. So, yeah. So if it came with like a costume, so that Zargon, the player who plays Zargon, the evil wizard, could dress up as an evil wizard, then it might be worth $100. If they change the rules to make it more like Dungeons and Dragons and less like a cheap knockoff of Dungeons and Dragons, maybe it would be worth $100.
I do like the Zargon costume. So
yeah, but please go ahead.
Okay, it says it includes the HeroQuest game system as well as 4 bonus hero miniatures and 1 exclusive miniature only available during the campaign. From what I've gathered, looks like if you back it, I don't know if they're actually only doing it for this boot, but it sounds like the exclusive miniature only available for the campaign is at least only if you back it. So,
but the 4 other ones are whenever.
Gotcha. They just exist. But
right.
The whole point is they're really just they're not really any more rules or stuff. And they did actually reboot like Keller's Keep and the Return of the Witch King or something like that. The
Curse of Keller's Gorge.
No, Keller's Gorge is much better. What's it, the Witch King? Something. Anyway, the initial expansions are also something you can get, and they just give you more miniatures. The miniatures look notably better. Instead of like there were like 8 orcs in the game, because you could have some of the scenarios had crap ton of orcs, and you had 8 of the same orc, looked very bad, in the same pose. Now there's 8 miniatures for orcs, cool, but there's 4, so you get, instead of 8 times 1, you get 4 miniatures twice. And the 2 of the male orcs are in different poses, and there's 2 female orcs also with different poses. So there's some, at least, variety. The cool point is the miniatures look a lot better. At the very least, if you just wanted the ye old game, and you wanted these better looking models, you have it. But I really wanted a crunch update. I kind of figured that it was a good start. They could at least take something they got from Advanced HeroQuest that they released ages ago and did something with that, or maybe even have some, here's HeroQuest and here's an alternate rule set for things we've learned in the past 30 years in the development of board games.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to compare it to another sort of re-release of a nostalgic old title that I'd seen an article on a couple weeks ago. Apparently, possibly to coincide with the new movie coming out, the old board game from the 70s, Dune, is being re-released in sort of a similar scenario, although they said that they've done some smoothing out of the rules to make it play a little better in addition to art updates, and the price point is notably less, although that doesn't include any miniatures as far as I know. I just thought it was interesting to hear that HeroQuest had gone with such a bare bones re-release of the same system.
Yeah, especially with a company with such presence in the board game industry.
I'm starting to feel a little, maybe personally attacked that you're always just like, oh, it's just art updates. Art is hard, man.
I understand, but
art can be hard. That being said, I will say that whenever you introduce this subject for us to talk about, I looked up the prices and I guess in the 80s, or like 1992 or whenever HeroClix came out,
89.
it retail. Sure, okay, that's yes. I think I read it was like $30,
Yeah.
and with like inflation, that'd be about $63. So I was wondering where the extra $40 came from. I can understand a little bit of markup. I would be like, okay, Kickstarter, yada yada. You want to make a profit? Let's say 70, but 100 does seem kind of strong for, which is it's not a.
And then you have to pay $25 shipping too.
Oh, geez. You kind of point you kind of put your nose on the head of it earlier. It's a game for like teenagers. It's like introductory D&D, so it's not supposed to be like who's this for? Because if you've got like who's the target audience? If you've got nostalgia, maybe you could get away with $100. If you're trying to actually create it as a product to sell to new people, $100 is a pretty heavy buy-in when you can get Dungeons and Dragons rules for what, $30 for a player's handbook, 50 for, 80 kind of a situation. Like it would make sense as an introductory into that if it was priced cheaper. Like it was priced like those like the red box of D&D and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. If you're really wanting to ensnare the minds of the young into the evil ways of role-playing games.
Satan's game.
Right. I just remember Brett told us a story about how when he and his friends that had played D&D got this new game, HeroQuest, they started playing it and realized this is just D&D, but not as good. And then they just started playing D&D instead.
With those minis.
Yeah. It's actually funny because we used to play HeroQuest and we were like, let's dig this back out. And then we ended up just using the board and the miniatures for D&D and scrapped everything that was HeroQuest.
So you started with HeroQuest, learned D&D, and like got nostalgic, went back to it, and then was like, no, we can't.
Yeah, so
okay.
what I ended up doing is effectively Zargoning a dungeon with some of the stuff from the Witch King with all they gave you, if you bought the Witch King expansion, you had way more undead miniatures. So I had effectively some second edition D&D like monsters. So I just found like skeletons, zombies, and stuff, and filled out the whole dungeon. And this is how they got introduced to wights, because I kind of just used proxies from the I think it was the crappy mummies it came with. So I'm like, hey, you're gonna fight wights, and they're like, wait, we lose experience, and it was really memorable there. But I was like, wait, none of that has anything to do with HeroQuest. It's just I just had a bunch of undead miniatures from the thing, and it was I guess that's it. It was just way more fun to play D&D after having been introduced to it than actually playing HeroQuest. Now, I think at that time we were, even if you go to the age point, I'm pretty sure we were 14, so 13 or 14. Yeah, so at that point we're like, yeah, D&D's better. So even then, if a 13 or 14-year-old can go, can't we just use these miniatures and play D&D? I don't know what the target age really is then, except if maybe just to say, hey, guys, remember this? Member berries, and then get the nostalgic people.
Hey, you boomers with expendable currency.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't actually really know how Rage Badger really started. The name, I can't remember how it started, but ultimately, I feel like it would be inappropriate to call it Rage Badger if we didn't actually have Raging Badgers. And this session's Raging Badger is Cliff. Cliff, what makes you rage currently?
Currently, the thing that makes me rage is people getting mad because someone spoiled something for them. And this is going to take a story to set up. So, back in fall of 2013, Game of Thrones Season 3 had concluded in the summer, and I was at a bar trivia night with some of my friends, and was talking with one of them about the events of the novel A Storm of Swords, which had had some of the events from season 3 show up in it. And we were talking about, it was nice to see how they depicted that. It'd be interesting to see, and we went into some specifics about some things that were coming up in the show that had already happened in the books. And one of my friends slammed his drink down on the table and shouted at us, "Thanks for ruining the next season for me," and stormed out of the bar. And at that point, my rage about people getting mad about spoilers really began, because that book was published 13 years before that time.
Is this somebody I know?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So that was roughly equivalent to me having said that Bruce Willis was dead the whole time in The Sixth Sense.
What the... Cliff!
So, I know. So this ties into Gloomhaven somewhat, because I know that a lot of people get upset when they run into people in forums or on social media talking about their experiences in Gloomhaven and saying things that people haven't run into yet, that this somehow ruins their experience. So to those people, I don't know what you're going through. It's always nice for me to find something out, especially if somebody else is having fun doing it. So just take it a little lighter with the spoilers, okay? It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty big difference too. There's like the guys who grabbed the Harry Potter book early off the back shelves when they had like access to it at their bookstore, Kroger, or whatever, like supermarket, and there's going to be distributed on the shelves at their respective places, and they go skip through as fast as they can, find out that Snape kills Dumbledore, and they drive around while people are waiting in line, and they're like, "Hey, Snape kills Dumbledore," and shouting at people waiting in line to buy the book. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's just
pretty dick move.
Yeah, that's just being mean.
I
think there's a huge difference between willfully being mean and just trying to enjoy talking to people about something that you've experienced, that they have experienced as well.
Yeah.
And someone overhearing your conversation or coming across it in a thread or a video or something and getting mad because they sought out the content.
Yeah,
and they're upset that they got more than they were looking for.
Yeah, I kind of agree, because the Gloomhaven community, especially with Isaac's post about how to kind of spoiler-proof your posts and saying, hey, try to use this kind of language to help people, better communicate, to give people, warnings. It ends up being kind of hard, because, I actually remember initially when we posted a video of the Geminet back when Stephanie and I first found out about Frosthaven, and we're like, this sounds awesome. We're going to talk about all these fun cards, and it's a starter class,
right?
And when we shared this to one of the social media platforms, someone actually got irate over thanks for spoiling the art of what one of this new class is and didn't hide the thumbnail. Now, a lot of people ended up commenting, it's a new starter class. If you're going to go to the Kickstarter, it's going to get spoiled for you anyway. So, but there's a level of having no warning coming in and being part of some group, having posts, when you post it to some media platforms, they're like, hey, there's a post, click it and view it. And then immediately in the text, bam, here's the name of the class, and having no you've walked in on it, and there's no spoiler guard, and it's just there. But then there's two people are having a conversation over there. You join in, and it's I spoiled myself, and getting angry at them. It's sometimes spoilers are just going to happen because there are going to be people just who want to gush about the game, and I've seen, and and some things that are even not even considered spoiler, like the Diviner from the Forgotten Circles. Not everyone got the memo that the Diviner is not considered spoiler. So there's this inconsistency on what is, what isn't a spoiler. I think most people get it, but some people use it as a way to just get angry at people, and some people just kind of weaponize it, like in your story, where it's like, thanks for this, 13-year-old book. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm nowadays I don't ever say like, oh, you've seen Sixth Sense, I don't want to spoil that, or like, so Darth Vader. Hold on, have you seen Episode 5 of Star Wars? That's the second one released, but it's Episode 5. Do you know? I don't ever. I just assume everyone knows about Darth Vader and Luke. So I don't think we need a spoiler guard for that. But I think there is a level of defensiveness, especially around the Gloomhaven community. I've tried very hard with like thumbnails to not spoil anything that's you wouldn't already have by looking out of the box. But I mean, it's one of those things where if I have an icon in the thumbnail and you jump into the video, expect everything about that to get spoiled. And that's as much of it. I think that's a sufficient amount of spoiler guard. Like, here, let's play this. Here are the 4 icons in the thumbnail. It's proceed at your own risk, because we are going to talk about everything. I mean, we don't even say like, hey, we're playing at prosperity level 5. You better be, I mean, if you're going to watch someone Let's Play, you better be prepared for spoilers, unless they say something like spoiler free, or like, I don't know how you can successfully...
How would you even do that? How would you play a game spoiler free? How would you have a discourse on something like that spoiler free? Because everything about that box is like a mystery and a discovery. It's like
it is
I can't even fathom how you would earthly do that. And I kind of agree with you, Cliff, is that if someone's going to get real mad about that, that's, it's kind of like, well, okay, this is a little bit tangential, but Brett, I got you Disco Elysium, and I frequently force you to play that game whenever you find free time. But I've told you, don't read anything about it, don't go out and talk to, just play it, just experience it, just have fun with it. And really, if like you're going to get upset about something being ruined for you, or you don't want to have something ruined for you, that's got to be the mindset you gotta take. You just gotta go, if I go out there and something gets ruined for me, then it's kind of my fault. I need to take the responsibility to not allow myself to get spoiled, to bunker down and not talk about this or read about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. I joined the Gloomhaven subreddit. Like, I think January 2019. I think I bought Gloomhaven. I can't actually remember. We'll say a year prior to that or so, maybe a little more. So I knew it existed. I was like, wait, there's a Gloomhaven subreddit. I've been playing it for I was completely aware, but I'm like, when I visited it the first time, I see like Squidface spoiler warning. Hey, I have a question about 3 spears, and I'm like, whoa. You know what? There's a lot going on here, and what we've jumped into so far has been really great, and I kind of don't want to have this stuff ruined. I just didn't even join the subreddit. I'm like, it doesn't exist. Because I knew that jumping in, although it would be great to be like, hey dudes, I've painted these miniatures now, I want to show them off. There's other communities I can do that in where they don't really care about discussing Gloomhaven. And I think it was over a year before I actually jumped into any Gloomhaven communities. Playing scenarios weekly.
I'm not in anything. You're not going to find me if somebody says they're me. I don't know why someone would be that psychotic, but if they were, it's not me. I'm not in any kind of group. Basically, this and the Thursday night games are my Gloomhaven experience, and I'm having a great time with it. And there's all sorts of cool discoveries and everything like that, and that's it.
Yep.
And if something were to be spoiled for me because I went to one of these places, that's my fault. It's like, why am I going to get mad because people who are excited about something are talking about it, and that ruined the experience for me when I went to go find it. Yeah, you're right. You're totally right.
All right, so let's think of more.
Well, that was my rage.
Yeah,
that's what rages. That's what. Yeah.
I'm sure I'll have a fun topic for myself, or someone else will come up next time. So yeah. Besides spoilers, there's a lot that Gloomhaven gets made up, like the monsters and the classes. So I figured maybe, in addition to having the Raging Badger, we could rotate through a monster and a class. So we have picked through lovely democracy and or dictatorship. We're going to talk about.
You decide.
Yeah, no, it's Oozes and Craghearts. We're going to first talk about the Cragheart because I decided. But first we're going to talk about Monsters Discussion, Oozes. Why Oozes? Simply because I blame Sastry. And number two, I think out of all of them, if you've seen the amount of memes, I make a bunch of just random memes because I get bored. And that's really, I think that's really the extent. Like, why do you make memes? I just got bored. It's really what it comes down to. I mean, you could find any number of reasons. It just comes down to that. And it always comes down to two things: Vermlings and Oozes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Vermlings, I usually end up not making fun of the Vermling monsters, the Vermling characters. But right. The Oozes, man, and it's not just me. I've seen other people make Ooze memes. Yeah, Oozes clearly have an effect on the community. And
do you want to talk about what that is for people who might not necessarily know, or add details?
Depending on how much experience if you have with certain scenarios, we're not going to talk about it, but two in particular.
Spoilers.
Come to mind. Yeah, there's more than two, but two in particular come to mind. I'm not going to talk about them, but I will talk about the monsters themselves.
Yes. What does an ooze do?
Are there monster cards considered spoilers? I don't think they are.
What does an ooze do? Tell us now, please.
What is what?
I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell us what an ooze does.
Ooze, I don't know. Oh, now oozes, they poison. They have range shots. They've got just the problem is they have a small shield, and that's really annoying on how they get weighted, because sometimes they'll have monsters with a huge shield, but you're like, okay, I'm just gonna bring in like this shield thing, but your health pool is so small that just one shot kills you. And then you sometimes have monsters with no shield, and you go like, fine, I'm just going to do a big attack, and it's all going to the dome. Boom! But they've got like just a little shield, so every attack you end up doing gets minimized just a little bit. But they only have one shield, so they have this big health pool. But they have one card that says that allows them to heal, and they have ways to damage themselves. But those also end up spawning a normal ooze in the process. Now, there's ways to play around that, but they're only... every monster deck has 2 shuffles in it out of their 8 cards. And their 2 cards are the same, split. So it's at 94 initiative. They take 2 damage, then create an ooze with a normal ooze, equal to their same current health. But they can't go over. So like an elite ooze that's at full health takes 2 damage. It spawns a normal ooze. The normal ooze is at max health. So one of the annoying parts is you'll open some rooms that are like, here's 5 oozes. And they're like, you weren't ready for 5 oozes. And they're like, all right, here's 10 oozes. And that quickly can change a scenario. Or it'll be annoying where you get it's so random, because sometimes you can get to a room like, all right, what are they doing? We're going to move to you and we're going to heal ourselves. Well, you're already at full health, so thanks for getting closer. What are you doing next turn? We're going to knock everyone away. Well, I'm still pretty far away. And then we're going to do a short range attack after. Okay, you can do that. What are we doing after? We're going to do some weak attacks. Well, now we're in range, so thank you for doing your weak attacks. Where's the split? And now they've gone 3 turns without splitting, but whereas previously you could have had like a split. Here's 10 attacks. Now we're going to move to you and do and then the 3rd turn we're going to all power attack. And they're like, the shuffle order can completely change it, especially over one scenario. There's one scenario where if you end up playing it on hard mode, and they draw a split immediately because the large map size and the positioning of them, the wrong shuffle on turns 1 and 2 can almost end the scenario. Like, it ends up almost becoming impossible. And I say this because there are people who are literally Gloomhaven playtesters that have said something almost that verbatim. That it's like, well, sometimes it's just the shuffle order. And honestly, people like praise RNGesus. Oozes feel like praise RNGesus the whole way.
Yeah, I can definitely say that in our experience, we have come across a few times where the last room of the dungeon is just a room full of oozes at the end, and we have to fight our way through it and get unlucky with what cards come down. And then that one particular scenario, we did pretty well with our luck. I actually really like seeing oozes because I find that they have made me think more than most monsters do. In particular, if you know that they're going to be doing a split and you happen to go before them, it really affects which ones you want to leave alive but only bring down to low health, or which ones you want to kill, depending on where they might be able to put a new ooze or not.
Right. Like
So-
positioning. Like I know we've blocked a couple of splits simply by being like, you stand here.
Right.
Because now there's
So I
no
think
open slot for it to split into.
Yeah, so I think they have really brought a fun problem-solving aspect to some of our playthroughs.
I'd agree with that.
I find them incredibly annoying because they can definitely be very very strong if you get the wrong cards. But overall, I really do enjoy having oozes in a scenario.
That's fair. Cliff, just a quick question: Have we done a scenario in the Let's Play of where there's Savas in it?
Apart from the Cragheart, I don't think so.
Okay.
So
That's maybe I'll dislike Savas more than
that's an
Oozes.
awful evil smile blown out by that by that big
scary
bright light.
smile for sure.
So you're aware of monster.
All right,
weight
the
and
Joker.
amount of, yeah. So there's like living bones. You can have up to 10 on the board.
Right.
So that's part of how they balance it. Is
Mhm.
you can have up to 10 living bones. That's cool.
Yep.
But
Yep.
only up to 6 cultists. Savas only go to 4.
Okay. Very strong, those Savas.
I mean, given from the Cragheart lore, yeah, I mean the oozes go to 10,
right.
but yeah,
Because the Cragheart is a failure
the Cragheart's a failure.
in the Savas culture.
Yeah, and
Oh God, because he was a badass mofo.
yeah, he's a failure. And what do what
Holy
do
fuck.
Savas value over others? Look, what's above all else? What is important?
Mastery over the elements.
And yeah, and specifically, their motive is power, but it is mastery of at least elements. Of at least one element. Come on, but multiple elements preferred, and
Right.
they are power hungry, and you can definitely. It feels like that when you fight them in game. So I think we could talk about those another time after you guys have.
After
got
we've
to experience
experienced
that.
Yeah.
But instead, we could talk about the Cragheart, who is a playable character and definitely has, over time, learned to master his element. But I think, although initially I think the Cragheart was fun to play, I think his lore ended up being much more interesting than some of the other starters for me personally. With the that reading the story on the back.
Yeah. The fact that he was considered a failure in his culture because he didn't master the elements that they wanted him to, so he went off to spite them essentially and become great his own way. He was my first ever Gloomhaven character was the Cragheart. I really enjoyed the build that I sort of pursued, which involved a lot of obstacle manipulation, summoning obstacles next to things to do damage to them, moving obstacles from one place to another to damage things, and also sort of molding the map in a way that could benefit our group by creating walls and mazes and sort of forcing enemy movement to go the way we wanted it to. And his mastery over Earth, I think, it's pretty good. So I don't know what those Savas were complaining about.
I wonder if it was after the fact.
Probably.
I was constantly and thoroughly impressed. Like once you kind of got a whole hold of him, like you kind of you played enough games. You're an intelligent enough person that you were getting it going really well and everything. But you got to a point where it was just like whatever the map was, it wasn't going to be that. The movement for things wasn't going to be that. It was going to be what you wanted it to be. You know,
What I-
if this
what
door was
actually-
going to open and these guys were going to flood in and then they were going to swoop around this thing, like you would just redraw that entire situation to what you wanted, and that was incredibly awesome to see in like a level 1 character. You know, that was really
starter
cool.
character,
Yeah, a starter character. I'm sorry, not a
Yeah.
level 1, a beginning character.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminded me because like what I like to tell people is stop trying to play D&D when you're playing Gloomhaven. Play Gloomhaven, and because I've heard some people like, so I went in with my tank. I'm like, well, what do you mean by your tank? Like, which characters? Like, well, the brute. And I'm like, oh, what scenario are you 2? Like, oh, whoa. You can kind of build a tanky brute, but if you're on scenario 2, you do not have the tools to play a tank. Play a brute. Don't play a tank. So,
Right.
It quickly turned from the Cragheart from let me run in there and take the hits and then I'll heal myself from
That's how you
all right,
started playing. Yeah.
I'm gonna back up. There's gonna be a wall here. In the end, only one enemy is actually gonna get within range, so we can deal with 1 attack 3 by the end of this. And it's like, cool. Can we take a 3-hit this turn between the 4 of us? And then the 4 of us just start laying a big barrage of attacks on them. And then the next turn, all right, cool. I'm gonna actually move this one obstacle, and then now we've opened up a path. We run in, then Peter's brutal run in, hit a guy, and then like push him into a trap. By scenario 53, I remember specifically where it's like, everyone, you must survive. And it's like, okay, cool, but there's already traps and obstacles in the scenario. What if there were more? And then,
Yeah.
and then watching enemies like, well, like eventually it's going to take a bunch of turns, but I can run over here and one over here, and then one eventually had to run into a trap, triggered it, and then by the end of this scenario, I can't remember at what point I'm like, this is already won. I'm just going to get experience now. But
Right.
the biggest thing at the end was largely just because a lot of the stuff leading up to that just was monsters had spent so many turns just running around trying to find correct paths to get to us that they spent very few turns attacking us. And that's kind of one of the Cragheart's strengths. And I think some people are like, I've got this cool ranged build, and the ranged build can be really cool where you're like, dude, I'm going to do this, and then I shoot 2 of these attacks, and then there's an enemy that's in range of both of them, and I slammed a bunch of direct damage that can't be resisted, blah, blah, blah. And some of that's cool, but just the object manipulation, obstacle manipulation, and the ability to not only mitigate damage done to himself, but the whole party as a result of that ended up one of the ways that this guy just ended up fascinating me as my first character as well in the IRL campaign that I started back in 2018.
Yeah, he's a tank because he's definitely preventing damage. He's positioning damage, but he's doing his damage mitigation through the map. And then if he does need to take a hit, he can. It's a very different way of tanking. It's not a traditional way of tanking of being a big iron wall that somebody punches until it falls down.
Yeah, and he's got
very cool.
a minimal amount of healing, but honestly, between some of the other stuff, his high health pool, the fact that he can equip, items that give him, he can equip the heavy items that would normally give you a bunch of negative ones, but he has the perk to ignore that. So he's like, all right, I've got some armor on, I have a little bit of heals. So he doesn't need to bulk up on like shield cards. He doesn't need any of that. He just needs the bare minimum tanking essentials because he has the high health pool. And with that obstacle manipulation, it just ends up being notably better, especially against enemies that have high shields, where it's just like you take 2 damage. No drawing modifiers, just take 2 directly.
Right. Yeah, I think we're gonna eventually miss once the curse hearse retires.
Yeah.
We're not going to have nearly as much damage suffering. So any of those opponents with high shield is going to become a lot more difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
Craghearts tends to be a pretty good shield breaker as a result. There's a couple classes that can do it, but he's one of the especially when he comes down to that blind destruction. Have you seen his level 9 card, blind destruction?
Yeah.
Sashay, have you?
No, the Cragheart? No.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird because it almost doesn't seem like it's worth a level 9 card, but
Okay.
it ends up being really powerful just because it's one of those things where you can all right, so range attack 4 at range 4 awfully feels kind of like it's a very too good to be a level 1 card. But that's a really kind of crappy start. It's not terrible, but for a level 9 card. But then pick one enemy next to the target you attacked. Then they suffer damage equal to the damage you dealt to the first enemy.
Right.
So if you've really optimized your perk deck, which at level 9 is probably good, well, you probably have some good items. If you find a way to buff this, like say, hey, I've got a bottom half that buffs an attack or something, you can say, or even if like say, like, hey, I drew a +1 to my attacks and then I drew a bless. Cool.
And then pumps in, like, drink some potions or something.
Yeah, or
like
any
that,
number
like
of things.
damage
Yeah.
potions.
So you're like, all right, I just do 10 damage with this. You got lucky. But then that guy next to it also suffers 10 damage, ignoring shields, everything. It just straight up suffers.
Yep.
And for a non-loss card, where it's even
that's
if
non-loss? Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it ends up being often without like getting lucky and stuff. Usually end up doing 5 or 6 damage. So then causing another target nearby to also do 5 or 6 damage. So with backup ammunition.
Backup ammunition.
Yeah. You can. The funny part is I've seen stuff where it's like, all right, I'm going to attack him and attack him. Like that guy took 5, that guy took 6. Cool. So that's 11 damage. And then the guy sandwiched between them suffers 11 damage.
11 damage. Yeah.
And,
very nice.
Yeah, and that ends up being like, oh wow, that's a lot, and it is, and I love it. So
I wonder how many people kind of like figure some of this stuff out, like the map manipulation and whatnot out. You know, I don't know.
See, I'm not really sure because initially when Gloomhaven started, Isaac designed the 4 main classes. He wanted them to feel familiar, so he did. He started them on the fighter, thief, cleric, mage.
Yep.
But he didn't want to. He didn't want it to feel like that. So like the Tinkerer doesn't necessarily feel like the cleric. It feels like the Tinkerer, but it kind of fills a similar role. The Scoundrel awfully feels like a.
Yep.
You know.
Oh, the Mind Thief, yeah. The Scoundrel, right.
Scoundrel feels
I forgot
like
that existed.
Between all of its stuff. The Spellweaver feels very interesting. It has its own unique thing with Reviving Ether. And the Brute kind of feels like a heavy damage fighter, but he has his own level of durability. And like he getting in there, it's very front line, but he still has a pretty good movement. But I mean, some fighters end up being like charge in there, so good mobility ends up being kind of makes sense. And then he had 2 bonus characters. And the Mind Thief and the Cragheart were supposed to be like, these could be interesting, but they may feel a little alien. And the Mind Thief, he thought, like, you're a melee character, but your health pool's crap, but you kind of have to worry about what augments you have to play, which end up, one of them's really the only one that really matters, although Phantasmal Killer can be played really well, but it's a level 9 augment. But for the most of the time, you're just going to be using Mind's Weakness. And the Cragheart was supposed to be this universal, like, he's good at a lot of things, but you kind of, since they're kind of baked into the cards, it's awfully hard to, like, I'm good at everything. Like, where it's very easy to do with, like, D&D clerics to make a very powerful universal character. The Cragheart was almost like, I can fill in whatever role you need me to be, and I'll be pretty good at that. And although he does have that, I think he really is best in his map manipulation role, which is kind of not a normal thing in a lot of games. And I'm kind of surprised because, like, although I think of, like, 4th edition D&D, I know will probably get executed for promoting that. Like, hey, maybe that wasn't, that was really great, wasn't it? Map manipulation was actually really a big part of that. And
it was huge.
I think and I think that's one of the reasons why I love the Cragheart. And some people are like, 4th edition D&D, you couldn't roleplay. Or I don't really know why it's so maligned, but
I still, to this day, and then we'll get off the subject, I, in my heart of hearts, believe 4th edition would be a resounding success with its own little cult following. There's always this little group of community, kind of like a Gloomhaven style community that, religiously follows it, plays it all the time, absolutely loves it. If it was not called Dungeons and Dragons. If it had any other name, I believe it would still, to this day, be something instead of this, like, black mark on tabletop gaming's history.
And
That's the end of that soapbox.
I hate that perception of it because I kind of felt like it did things to the point where it got how Cliff was saying earlier about I like Oozes because I start thinking honestly a lot of times in 5th edition combat, from what I've seen how people play, from what I've observed from hosting Kingdom Death at Old School Gaming and eavesdropping on the oodles of Adventurers Leagues and watching some people on YouTube and Twitch, it seems that like a lot of what people pride on themselves on are like there's some cool situations they get in, and then like there's some role playing element like, oh wait, is there this rope there? I want to do something, and it's kind of like cool, but in the end it feels like there's a lot of at the mercy of the DM, and you all have to come together to come up with cool narratives, and that's pretty great. But 4th edition almost gave everyone like, the rules, and so do. Damn it! All right, and exactly the confines. I'm so sorry.
No, it's funny. It's just all the other like stupid jokes, and that's the one that got me. Yeah. I'm watching both your faces, like every stupid garbage pile that flies out of my mouth, and there's like a suppressed laughter. That's the one that got me was fucking Rick Astley.
Oh yeah. So
I'm stupid.
The thing is about it is player agency. Sometimes, like in 5th edition, I've seen people like the DM gives someone a cool thing and they're like, yeah, I feel good. And like some of the things I noticed in 4th edition is like people are like come up with stuff and like, okay, you know what, this enemy actually is really close to the end of that bridge there, and my Warforged has got this thing where if I move up and attack him, I can push 2 on him, and I can knock him right off and it's kind of like built in the rules. You kind of know how it is, and it certainly feels a bit gamey, but you get you get into this tactical mindset and looking at like, what do we have in front of us, and going like, well, these are kind of how fast we can move, how fast we can clear it there, and like, okay, so although I do run over there and knock them down, there are clearly archers there, so I can use this other action. I want to get behind this cover because I can get at least +2 AC from the range attacks, and we need to get over there. We can see there's 8 squares. That's not going to be something we clear without like. You start to think of in very strategically, and I've noticed that like it goes into this level of crunch that like Gloomhaven has when we're like, okay, we need to get 5 hexes to get over there. And like, I can burn a loss, but I can get to it, and I can like immobilize them. Oh, if we immobilize them, their archers will have to range attack you with disadvantage. That'll really help. And you kind of get in that same thing. And in 5th edition, some of the cool moments just feel like they come out of almost like fluff and like manipulating the room for like, oh, can I do this? And the DM's like, yeah, if you make an athletics check. Right. And they're like, cool. And first off, in its own right, that's amazing. I love it when people try to get inventive with like, wait, you said that they were fighting in a wine cellar? And like, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm holding a torch.
Yeah, and that's cool in its own right, but it does make for great narratives. It does make for great role playing for people to like, wow, I did this cool thing. But like 4th edition D&D, much like Gloomhaven, people figure out like, here is the puzzle, solve it, and. And there were so many ways where you could like. That's one of the things I loved about what Larasalt. Is that what that was? Where it was like
like the raid for quote unquote for lack of a better term,
and they were like so brutal. And the funnest part is when we were like the first one. I was watching some people step through it, and they're like, all right, cool. So there's tieflings and they're blasting you. The problem is you have to get over there. And like, oh, actually, I've got a way to get over that bridge just fine. So we can do this in this turn. They kill the tieflings. So it's like this other long way around looks so long, and I don't want to waste turns. They get to that door, and it's got a DC 20 thievery lock on it. And they're like, oh, what do we do? And not only that, but you have to like figure out ways to use the skill checks. And the funny part is actually the tieflings have their perception built in, so you can actually ambush them. They don't necessarily get the drop on you. So you're like, wait, we can actually use some of our skills here. It's like, I can use my athletics, I can clear that jump, and you end up actually not only using the skill proficiencies that you built in. Some people are like, dude, our party can't do that. Let's go the long way around because at least we can fight through that stuff. And it really got people thinking in that strategic perspective that I see in Gloomhaven. And I know we're way off topic from Cragheart, but I think
yeah.
I feel like the Cragheart could fit in 4th edition D&D really well.
It could.
Yeah,
it could.
absolutely.
That's actually, like talking about this, but I think a 4th edition versus Gloomhaven conversation or, side by side would be a very interesting exploration of both of those. Because they are cut from much the same cloth, whether or not they intend to be or not.
So we did do it for fans of Gloomhaven HeroQuest and discuss that. Maybe for our next time. Like, we'll say it.
Yeah, for fans of Gloomhaven, 4th edition. Please don't hurt. Please don't punch me, Mom. Please don't. We're going somewhere with this. We promise. Just
it's like
put down the bat.
All right. So episode 1. What did they do? Well, they did talk about the Landlord's game and 4th edition. Kill these guys. These guys are the worst.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Need to change this to very on-topic Gloomcast.
Yes. The mostest on topic.
The most on topic.
The most on topic ever. Why did you invite me to this again?
Because I didn't want to be on topic.
I guess not.
Final thoughts on Cragheart. And now that we're back to, this is where we started with this.
So I really enjoyed the Cragheart. The level of control over the map was great. The variety of choices you get to make with him when you're building him out, whether you want to be melee focused for this scenario because you think you're going to be in tight quarters, whether you really want to pump out some range damage, or my personal favorite, focus on thwarting the enemy's efforts to hurt you. I think it's just a great starting class.
Yeah, it's my favorite. It's funny when Price from Cephalofair sent us some promotional material. He decided to throw in some pins, and he's like, "I know what these guys are." We didn't stream any of our old campaign, our original campaign. We didn't stream any of that crap. It was all offline, and we didn't start streaming until this one. But he sent the pins he sent us were both Stephanie and I starters, the Cragheart and the Spellweaver. He's like, I just had a feeling. So evidently, Cragheart players. Honestly, I think we need to figure out how many Cragheart players love 4th edition D&D, because I know Cliff and I do. We're both.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to avoid the Cragheart in this campaign. I wanted perhaps someone else to have hands-on with it, and even though when I went to Gloomhaven Digital, the first thing I was like, all right, when they started it up, like, what combination do you want to, back when it originally started, it's like you can only have these small number of classes, and when you start the campaign you can only have 2 characters, but we'll eventually allow you to bring 3 and 4 as you get achievements. And I'm like, well, Cragheart and immediately
right,
Cragheart and Spellweaver is what I ended up going with. The first thing I'm like, Cragheart, it's number 1. I am using that, so I think it's pretty obvious. I love it. I think it's one of the better design classes.
It definitely seems that way. I have of the 3 people who are here, I have never played a Cragheart, but I definitely like what he did on the board, and it seems like it fits that philosophy of easy to learn, hard to master. But once you master it, like, holy smokes, just the scenarios were not what the designer wrote. The scenarios were what Cliff wrote, and that was really cool to see on, So yeah, I would definitely say I like it. I never, handled one directly, but I like what it did.
Look at me, I am the map designer now.
Yeah, exactly. This map sucks, Marcel. I'm gonna draw a better one with my powers.
What would happen if, it reminds me of that SpongeBob, that Star Patrick. We're gonna take this here and put it over here, and just do that the whole scenario. And that's another meme. I'm gonna have to do that now.
Right. You're gonna have to draw that one, right. Or get me to do it.
That. I'll add that to the end of this episode.
You have to add that to the first drawing.
So speaking of the end of this episode, I think that's about. We've covered all the topics we wanted to. I'm actually,
and then some.
And then some. I think it's gonna be funny to be like. I really hope that said person, if we get him to join in this, doesn't watch too much, and we're like, all right, tell us how you feel about the Landlord's game. Like, what? Surprise him right off the bat. And how do you feel about 4th edition D&D? It's like, I thought this was the Gloomhaven channel.
You are really forcing. I'm sorry, you're really forcing your hand on making us play the Landlord's game on stream now.
Oh,
Yep.
crap. Now I don't. Now
Oh,
I regret it, but it's
it's-
going to have to happen.
It's exclusive Patreon content. So
Oh, God.
patreon.com/Rage Badger Gaming for all
I've
those
almost-
who are interested in seeing us play the Landlord's game, or if you would like to join the Patreon's only Discord and talk to me.
All right. So if you've made it this far, congratulations.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We apologize profusely.
Yep.
We apologize, but we're going to thank you for that. So next time we will have clearly a discussion of another class. Maybe I can get Stephanie to join in by talking about the Spellweaver. Talk about another monster. Maybe we'll ask Patreon poll, hey, what monster should we talk about? And we'll probably be talking about 4th edition D&D. I have other things maybe even talking about, instead of the Harrower lore, talking about another race, or even the Jixera plot, which is covered at the beginning of the game, and then we'll leave it there and make it spoiler free. But if there's anything else, I think let us know in the comments, and I think if we find ourselves particularly attached to any of those topics, we might have to include them on the next one. So praise Xorn and
Praise
Praise Xorn.
Next time we will have direction in this project.
No, we will not.
No.
But hopefully you'll still watch it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, what else are you going to do this year?
Yeah. You're forced.
We
to
got
listen, sorry.
we got you by the balls. You got nothing else to do.
I think we'll just leave it there. Got
The
your
end.
balls. You have to watch episode. You have to watch episode 2.
You got nothing else to do.
Yep. That's it.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.